Ready? Everybody ready? Yes. Am I ready? Maybe. We'll see. So, welcome. You think you know meta model? Who thinks they know meta model?
That's why we're here.
How specifically do you know meta model? So, you read some stuff in the description, the brochure thing, that told you some stuff about what was going to happen in this. Did anybody used to watch the TV series Stingray as a child? Do you remember what they used to say at the start of every episode? Anything can happen in the next half hour, or in our case 90 minutes, or a little bit more than 90 minutes. Now they've told us that we need to go for lunch at 1:15. So they've said we can run over a bit with Q&A or whatever it is people want to do after these sorts of talks, go and recover or something, I don't know. So, and we're live on Facebook as well, so that means you'll be able to watch this again. If you just can't get enough of it, you'll be able to watch it again afterwards on Facebook and also on YouTube. So, you read some stuff on the website or the app or whatever about this session, and I said things like, you've probably heard that in the first minute the client's going to tell you everything you need to know in the first minute. And have any of you experienced that? The client tells you straight away what the real issue is, and then after an hour of labouring you find out and then you think, oh, they told me that, if only I'd listened. And I said that if we can really understand what a person's not saying, but if we can really understand what a person's communicating, representing to us, even if they don't know that they are, can we get the sound guy to turn the... it's a lot of bit of it. There's the sound guy. Can we get it? There he is. That's the thing with these kind of support. You just summon them like a genie, and they appear. So if we can get the real meaning, if we can get the real... The kind of template that sits behind a person's communication, then we understand what they're really experiencing and what they're really trying to communicate to us, even though they're not saying it. And that creates, I've found, and hopefully you'll find too, that creates a very odd and very deep rapport, that person feels like you really understand them, you really listen to them in a way that other people don't. Because, when we're just a friend in the pub and somebody's telling us about their day at work, we're not saying, and how do you know that person did this and meant that and so on. What we say is, well, what do we say? When our friend in the pub or your other half, your partner at home is saying, oh, I've got this problem at work or whatever, what kind of stuff do you say to them? Next. Yeah, make an appointment.
You made it say something.
Yeah, just keep quiet, smile, offer tea, that's nice. You what, sorry? You said come up with solutions. I'll tell you what you want to do. Come up with solutions. I'll tell you what you want to do. You want to tell your boss to get stuffed and stick their job at, and all that sort of stuff. And when a person is giving you advice like that, I'll tell you what you should do is, how do you feel about that? You smile and ignore it. You say, I don't smile, I just ignore it anyway. I say, you idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't understand, it's not like that. I've tried everything, nothing works, that sort of stuff. So if we really connect with that deeper meaning that the person's giving to us, the client, the colleague, friend, whoever it is, then that creates a depth of understanding that goes far beyond that. I said that coaching sessions would be shorter and more impactful, because if the client told you in the first minute, then you've got like 59 minutes left to do whatever it is you want to do with them. That doesn't mean you rush. That doesn't mean the coaching session's over in 2 minutes. But that's then about performance, not technique. We're not talking about that this time. Hey, maybe that might be my session for next year's conference. What do you think? So, and I said about content free, because once a person has given you the kind of underlying template for their behaviour, that behaviour isn't isolated to that one instance they're telling you about. That behaviour will show up again and again and again. So how many people here, how many of you have, if you're at home watching on Facebook, there's no point putting your hands up, can't see you. So put your hand up if you've ever experienced starting a new job, or starting a new relationship, or going on holiday, or starting a project, and getting the sense that this is going exactly the same way all of the previous for jobs or relationships or things went, and I'm still doing things that are not productive. Anybody? 3, 4, 5, 6, it's a small number of people. Most of you are not admitting to it, because you say, no, you're an NLP workshop, and so I'm perfect in every way. So we can work content free, because once we've deduced what that underlying template is, we can say, I bet when you start a new job, it's like this for a couple of weeks, and then it's like this, and then in this, and then after 6 months you're fed up with it and you do that. And they say, yeah, that's exactly what I do. So that's how we can work content free, because they don't have to tell us about every specific situation that they're in. We know what the template is. You know what a bicycle is. You know how a bicycle works. You don't need to have ridden that particular bicycle. Or has anybody hired a car coming here? Anybody hired a car? No? Anybody ever hired a car in your life ever? So, or driven a new car that you've never driven before? Excellent. Do you sit there and read the manual from cover to cover? Before you just get in, you know where the pedals are, you know where the thing is. It might take you a while to find the windscreen wipers. You might be flashing your lights at everybody when it's raining or whatever for a while till you work out they're on a different side. But you've driven one, you've kind of driven them all, because that's why they're designed the way that they are. So let me start with a question for you. What is, well, I'd say start, I've been going for a few minutes already, but at this point, starting now, what is meta model? It's what? A model of models, okay? So meta, meaning above, higher than, collection of, models, a collection of linguistic models. That's one way of describing it. Anybody else got any other way of, yes?
A way to figure out the map of the world of another person or your own?
A way to figure out the map of the world of another person or your own. That sounds good, assuming that we understand what we mean by map of the world. But let's assume that as people who are interested in NLP, we kind of have a sense of what that might mean. Excellent. So what if I were to say to you that for the purposes of these next few minutes that we've got together, meta model is a way of understanding the relationship between a person's language and a person's behaviour, and how both of those are based on the same underlying templates, and those templates are basically the result of our lifetime's experience. You've had a lifetime of experience, not much, because obviously you're very young, but you don't have a lot of life experience, but you have a lifetime of experience. What are you laughing at? You have a lifetime of experience. I'm young. And those experiences have taught you certain things in order for you to stay safe, because one of the things that we are evolved to do is have experiences, have sensory experiences, generalize those, and project those generalizations forward in time, so we know what's going to happen when we do a certain thing. We know what's going to happen when we get in a hire car. We know what's going to happen when we go to a conference, roughly. We know we're going to walk in, there'll be tea and coffee, there'll be people, there'll be stuff going on. We kind of know what to expect. We know what to expect because we take those past experiences and we put them in the future, and then we plan our actions, and then we organize our behavior in order to achieve some goal that we have, which might be have a cake, get a cup of tea, talk to somebody before going into the first session, whatever it might be. So, if you were to have a coaching session, and you're not, but if you were to have a coaching, so this isn't an invitation. Nobody's going to come up and sit at the front. We're not going to do that. If you were to have a coaching session right now, what would be the question that you would ask in that coaching session? Who's got one? You can either volunteer, or I'm going to start throwing the brain. Well, it could be, but if we call it an issue, then it's we've got to fix it. What is the question that now Chris had his hand up first.
What do you want to work through? What do you want to work through?
As client, sorry. If you were to have a coaching session as a client, if you were to go to a coaching session for something that you wanted more of or less of in your life, what would be the question it would ask?
How can I have more influence?
Lovely. Nice and succinct. And what's your name, sorry?
Michelle.
Michelle. Would you like to come up here and... No. So Michelle's question would be, how can I have more influence? And hands up here who works as a coach or would consider themselves to be a coach? Or ever has sort of one-to-one coachy kind of conversations with people? Lovely. So that looked like it was about half, 2/3 of you. So if your client sat down in front of you and you said to them, what would you like to work on this month? And they said to you, how can I have more influence? Then that would start off certain thoughts in your mind. You would pick a direction to go in, you'd start asking questions, you'd gather information and so on. Is that, yes, pretty much the way you would go about it? Whatever coaching approach you have, whatever model, whatever you do that, that's going to define the content of your questions. But that's basically what you're going to do. You're going to gather information, ask questions, get the client to maybe see from different perspectives or whatever it might be, however you're going to work with them. So what I would like you to do is just very quickly, only for a couple of minutes, I'd like you to just turn to the person or the people next to you, so it's only going to be 2s or 3s, nobody needs to change chairs or anything like that. Talk about how, if your client presented this to you, talk about what would your next question to them be? And for those of you watching in Facebook Lounge, you can play along too. So think about, if somebody said to you, how can I have more influence, then what would your next question to them be? So what kind of things did you come up with? What would your next question be?
Why do you need it?
Why do you need it?
What's influence to you?
What is influence to you? To whom? Who will you be when you have more influence? I'll be like, me with more influence. Somebody at the back, have their hand up there? Hairy gentleman at the back. What does influence mean to you? How would you know that you had more influence? What would you get if you had more influence?
Which context?
In which context? Now, lovely. So you've got questions, and the questions all presuppose certain things. So, for example, what was yours? Who would you be if you had more influence? Presupposes I'd be somebody different. And I might be, and I might not be. Because the thing is, we talk about leading questions. The thing to remember is every question is a leading question. Because every question presupposes an answer and constrains an answer. Now, you've got people like Wendy Sullivan here, and is it Lynn that Wendy's presenting with? Talking about clean language, and they're trying to remove those presuppositions and not guide the client through that. And what we're doing here is we're just taking, when I said the client will tell you everything you need to know in the first minute, that's not even exactly true. They'll actually tell you before they even start talking, if you're observant enough. Because what will happen is, as soon as the person starts to think about the thing they want or the thing they want to work on, they will start, the way I describe it is, they will start running the program that creates the behavior, that creates what they define as the problem, the issue, the goal, whatever it might be. So on their way to the coaching session, they'll be doing it. When they walk in the door, they'll be doing it. When they start talking, they'll be doing it. And if you think about it and you connect back through the contact, the experiences you've had with the client, you'll see it. So for example, I was doing a demo on a practitioner course a long time ago, and I asked for somebody to help me, and this guy got up, he walked towards the chair at the front of the room, he stopped halfway, he said, just get some. He goes back to his chair, gets a bottle of water, and then comes to the front of the room. And he sits down, and I said to him, what is it you'd like to work on? He said, well, I often find that I go to start something like a new project, and I just kind of stop before I've started, and then I kind of go back to where I was, and then, and then I start, and I'd like to just start. And he literally did it, because in his mind, he's thinking about the issue he wants to talk about, and of course in thinking about it, he's accessing those memories, those experiences, those templates are driving his behavior in a way that he's not even aware of, and that's true for for all of us. So we don't need to ask any more questions. What we can do is start analysing. Now, who's done a meta model on practitioner and master practitioner training? And have you done it kind of, nominalisation is a moment frozen in time. Now we will practice some nominalisation. So denominalise the word meeting and relationship and situation and stuff like that. Situation's an interesting one, isn't it? Because people say, oh, I've got this situation at work. Situation is a nominalisation of which verb? To situate. Or we generally shorten that to sit. And it's really weird, you see, if you just stick to the structure, because remember, meta model don't care about the content, because the content isn't the problem. The content is just a current example of it. The problem isn't even a problem. The problem is just a behaviour. That behaviour is either aligned with the context, so it gets a result, or it isn't. So it becomes harder to get the results, and you have to put more energy into it. It's like a machine. You don't look after your car's engine, it has to work harder to do what it does. And it generates waste like heat and inefficient fuel consumption. And things like friction and heat, they damage machines, they break them. And what happens when we get stressed? What happens when we get stressed?
We eat more chocolate.
We eat more chocolate. Yes. Become inefficient. Your cortisol and stuff, your chemicals in your body change as a response to stress, and we don't think clearly. Stress harms us. It's harmful to our bodies. It shortens our lifespans. There was research done that says that persistent daily stress will shorten your life by about 20 years. So it's harmful. Stress is as harmful to a human body as it is to a car engine or any other kind of machine. It's a mechanical opposition of forces. And your mind, which looks like that, has to be brain, physically, your mind, that is a bit of software that lives inside that. That's not your brain, that's just a one I bought in a shop. It's not actually your brain, but it's like your brain. What it's doing is it's through this huge collection of motor outputs that touch every muscle in your body. And by muscle, I don't just mean the muscles on your limbs, your arms and legs. What other muscles do you have in your body that do very important jobs? Heart, yes. Tongue and vocal cords, so speech. Any others? Eyes. Muscles that control the actuation of glands, that control secretions of enzymes and hormones and stuff into your bloodstream. These are all controlled by motor outputs from your brain. And your brain is complex enough and totally capable of doing many jobs all at the same time, with the result that your brain is more than capable of getting your body to do two opposing things at the same time. Anybody remember that fad for isometric exercising? No, what was it, where you sort of tense both muscles at the same time, and you're like fighting against yourself rather than lifting weights, that sort of thing. Anybody remember that? Bit of a fad back in the 90s, I think. Yeah, and so it's quite possible for your brain to get your body to go this way and that way at the same time. And people talk about that, don't they? What sort of things do people say when they feel like they're going this way and that way at the same time? What do they say? You're torn. I'm torn between, torn in half. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. So people will tell us, they don't know that they tell us, but they're not describing a metaphor, they are describing a literal physical experience. So if we get back to Michelle's statement, how can I have more influence? There is one thing that we can say for certain, which is at the moment, Michelle might experience what? Yeah, situations, times, when she feels like something's happening and influence would be useful in that situation. And what we do in meta model is we're going to do lots of analysis, and we're going to practice the analysis in a way that's natural and conversational. We're not going to bombard the client with questions. In fact, they're not even going to know that they're being analysed. Their experience, hopefully, will be they think they're being really listened to, and that they're being asked some very thought-provoking questions that nobody's ever asked them before. But that's obviously that's true for all kinds of coaching, not just using meta model. So what we do throughout doing the analysis is we don't think, she said can. Can is a modal operator of possibility, and therefore it means X, Y, and Z, and we don't make that analysis and keep it to ourselves. We check. We say, how can I, how? So how tells us what?
It's a behaviour.
That it's a process, a behaviour. There's a presupposition with how that's very important. That there is a way. So the first thing we might do is you might look at the first two words, how can, and think to ourselves, that's interesting. She's not saying, is it possible to, can I can't. She's saying, how can. So she's telling us that she knows or she believes that it's possible. But rather than just keep that analysis to ourselves, we test. And how do we test?
What if you try the way?
Not exactly, but as a generalisation, we ask them, Michelle, do you actually think it's possible for you to have more influence?
Yes.
Yes, that's how we test. We ask them, this is what I think about what you've just said. Do you agree or not? And the client will say,
Yes or no.
yes or no. That's it. That's how we test. It's that simple. We don't need to think up more complicated questions. We don't need to make it any more complicated than it is. There is already enough information here and in Michelle's behaviour before she asked the question, which I appreciate most of you may not have seen. But there is already more than enough information there for us to go on. So we don't need to ask any more questions other than testing what we're doing. Now what we're doing here in this workshop is we're taking a real-time, real client conversation, and what I meant when I said anything can happen in the next half hour, I don't know what's going to happen, means I don't know who's going to offer a question, I don't know what the question's going to be, I don't know what meta-model patterns are going to come up in there. And isn't that what happens when you're having a conversation with a client? You don't know what they're going to say. You don't know how you're going to deal with it. And if as a coach you're thinking, I'm seeing that guy at 2:30 today, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask him these questions, and then this will be the result, and then he'll be great, and he'll pay me loads of money, and all that sort of stuff. You can't predict that. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to go. You only think, so let's say your coaching session is 1 hour long. What is the only thing for certain that you can say about that coaching session? It'll end. Hopefully around about 60 minutes away, unless they walk out. But let's hope, assuming they don't, they stay with it, then the only thing you can say for certain about that session is it will take about an hour. You can't say anything else about it. You can't say where it will end up. So if you're thinking, where does the client want to end up at the end of the session, it's about an hour older. But where we get to, we're not having to rush. We're not trying to rush and get everything done in one session. So if you're having a coaching relationship with a client, this might take a number of conversations. Would you agree with that? Might be 2, 6, 10, I don't know. But it's an ongoing process. Because, this isn't just, even what the doctor says. What does the doctor says? Take 2 and call me in the morning. Even with the doctor, it's not, just take that, you'll be fine. It's come back and see me, call me if anything changes, come back in 2 weeks, whatever. So we know this isn't just a process that's going to happen all in one go. I know some people will say that, but in reality, when a person leaves the coaching session, maybe with a different perspective, a different outlook, what will happen as soon as they walk out of your door? Two significant things will happen. What's going to happen as soon as they walk out your door? Well, firstly, because their perspective has changed, their outlook has changed. Yeah, they'll see the world differently. Their behaviour, their belief, it might have changed, but they will see the world differently because they're observing the world and listening to the world now in a different way, from a different attitude. That attitude means that they are aware of their perception changes. Have you ever had a client say to you, after my conversation with you, after the coaching session with you, I just felt lighter, or things just seemed a bit brighter, or the thing that was going on at work just seemed like less of a problem. Have you had people say that? Good. So what they're describing is a change in their perception, their subjective perception. Perception becomes feeds into those templates that I talked about, those templates of our past experiences, our life to date. And that creates different reactions, and those reactions create different choices, and those choices create different behaviours. So the first thing that happens is they see the world differently. They say, oh, those people at work who were winding me up, they just seem insignificant now. Or it just doesn't seem like as much of a problem. My boss treats me differently. Do you think that's possible, that my boss treats me differently, totally independent of the coaching session that I just had? I've got to be doing something different, and my boss is reacting differently. If we are to believe in a systemic universe where things connect and there's cause and effect. So that's the first thing that will happen. The second thing that will happen is they'll start behaving differently. And what problem will that cause?
Other people around them will react differently.
Other people will react differently. And very importantly, when you're in a system like a workplace, colleagues, family, friends, they don't know that you've had the coaching session. They don't know that you've done whatever you've done. They expect you to be exactly the way that you were the day before. In fact, they depend on you being the way that you were the day before. So they don't resist your changes that you've made, but passively they offer resistance because they treat you the way that you do. So who here has ever run time management training? And you get people on time management training, they say, oh, this is fantastic, all these techniques, I'm going to try and do X, Y, and Z when I get back. I'm going to try and do this, I'm going to try and all that sort of stuff. Try is an interesting word as well. Come back to that. I'm trying to do all that stuff. And then within 24 hours of them being back at work, what are they doing? Old habits. Because they're lazy, they don't want to change, they just said it to be nice. Because the people around them don't know to treat them differently. And so if you're coaching people about things that are going on within a system, one of the things you've got to tell them to do is tell the people you work with that you're going to do things differently. Give them a chance to treat you differently. Don't think it's all just magically gone away and it's all going to magically change. You've got to do something. So what does the word try mean? Or what do they tell you on practitioner training that the word try means? Or what do all these self-help business gurus on LinkedIn keep telling you that the word try means? Try means it's going to be hard. There's possibility of failure. You don't expect to succeed. Oh, and the example again on practitioner courses they give you is, oh, I'll try and go to the party. And it means you're not going to go to the party. That's not what try means. Imagine yourselves opening a door. Can you picture that? Excellent. Now imagine yourselves trying to open a door. What's the difference? Resistance. Did you fail to open the door? Not yet. Try is you're in the middle of it. It hasn't ended. So you can't say that you failed because it hasn't ended. But the picture that you're looking of is in the middle of the behaviour rather than the outcome of. So try is not a negation. So I've heard NLP trainers say that when somebody says the word try, it means they're not going to, and therefore it's a negation. Try is not a negation. In fact, if it's looking at a moment in time that's in the middle of the activity, it's more like what?
State of flux.
It maybe has more in common with a nominalisation. That we're looking at that moment in time that's neither at the beginning nor the end, it's somewhere in the middle. The door isn't open, it isn't closed, it's in between states. So who here has heard an NLP trainer say that but is a negation? But when you say but, it negates everything you said before. I was going to go to the party, but is not a negation. It's an exception. All but one of us. It means it's a generalization, then an exception. When you treat but as an exception, it's totally different to seeing it as a negation. So how can presupposes it's possible. That's interesting. What's interesting about I? You're the what, sorry? Cause, the cause. You're the cause. Yes, you're at cause. I. How can I do something? How can I get something? I'm the cause. Have. What does have tell us? Ownership. Have and influence fit together. Now, here's a bit of advice for you on meta model. So, those of you that studied meta model in practitioner or master practitioner training, how many of you did it by going through the different patterns and practicing types of nominalisations, practicing deletions, practicing... it's very neat and it's very nice, but real language isn't like that. You don't sit down with a client and say, right, please tell me about what you'd like to work on today using only nominalisations and deleted referential indices. Because that would make it easy. That would make it kind of fit the training style. What we've got to do first thing we do when we're doing analysis of meta model, we actually don't dive in and look at the words. The first thing we do is step back. Look at the big picture. What are the patterns that fit together? Because there are certain patterns in meta model. They don't exist in isolation. You'll see things fit together. And have and influence fit together. Can anybody see how? What kind of word is influence? It's a nominalisation. The word have, you said? Ownership. Possession. You can't possess an action. You can only possess an object. Oh look, an object. So in order to make influence a possession, it's been nominalised. Now, I've heard trainers say, and I've said it myself, some years back, that a nominalisation is a moment frozen in time. And because if you imagine yourself at a meeting. You all do that now? Imagine yourself at a meeting. Okay, get rid of that picture. And now imagine yourself meeting someone. What's the difference in the two pictures?
One's moving, one's still.
One was moving, one was still. So we can perform this type of test, this sort of comparison, and we can see in our own mind's eye that a nominalisation has a still image that goes with it. There's something far, far more important about a nominalisation. It isn't a moment frozen in time, it's a moment taken out of time. So what is this? Share with people on Facebook. Exciting. Some of them have never seen a pen before. I'm going to give them another look at that. So this is a pen. What was it before it was a pen? It just was. And lo, the pen was one. No. What was it before it was a pen? Plastic? Plastic granules in a factory? Big vat of ink? All that sort of stuff. Nothing personal? Not for you anyway. Oh, okay. It was a person sitting next to you didn't like. I didn't say it. Don't shoot the messenger. So, before it was a pen, it was plastic granules and a big vat of ink, a lorry full of blue ink. And after it's a pen, what will it be? Probably plastic granules again if we throw it in the recycling. Or it'll be landfill, or it'll be something for a fish or a panda to choke on, or something like that if we just discard it carelessly while we're at the zoo. I don't know. The point is, this has always been and will always be a pen. Because before it was a pen, it was something else. After it's a pen, it will be something else. This object exists out of time. Time is a subjective experience that we put onto the world. This pen is an object, whatever time of day it is. Influence, therefore, becomes an object, whatever time of day it is. And the way it sits in the sentence, so do you all know what we mean by subject, verb, object? Do you all know what that means? No? Okay, so in English, well, in every language actually, but I'm talking in English, so we'll use it as an example. In English, for a sentence to be grammatically complete, It has to have in it a subject, a verb, and an object in that order. So the cat sat on the mat. So which one's the subject? Which one's the object? And the verb connects the two together. The verb is the explanation of what is changing over time. Now this is very significant because that sentence cannot be in any other order and mean the same thing. If you imagine the cat sat on the mat, got a picture of that in your head? Hands up if the cat is black. Hands up if it's ginger. Hands up if it's white. Some people haven't. Tortoiseshell. Grey. How many colours of cats are there? So you got a picture of it. The blue cat. Ooh, Siberian blue. What's that? Expensive one. You like it? You have an expensive taste in cats. So now picture this. The mat sat on the cat. Different? Because the order of the language, the order of the words, tells us what to do in order to recreate that internally, and so the order is very important. And we know that. We know that intuitively. We learn that from an early age. Many languages are in the subject-verb-object order, and some languages are in a different order. They are in subject-object-verb. So if you're French, you might say, the cat, the mat sat on. And it would make sense in French. That wasn't French, just in case any of you are confused. But it's a bit like French. So they're in a different order. And that makes sense if you understand that language. And if you're bilingual, you can translate between the two, and the translation tells you which order things go in and what is sitting on what. Because that's quite important. Because if somebody says to you, can you put the cat on the mat? That's different to if they say to you, can you put the mat on the cat? So we need to know. So the structure tells us what's doing what to what. And the verb is telling us what that is, what that action is. Now we've taken a verb which is to influence, and we've turned it into a noun. And we've done that by putting it where the noun should be. And what that's done is it's made the cat how to sit. And the interesting thing is we're so flexible with our use of language, we could take out any of the subject, verb and object and the listener would still know what we were talking about, roughly. So if you walked into your kitchen at home and you said to your partner, it's on the mat again, there would be some prior experience, some prior context that would make them think, oh, that darn cat. So we know from past experience to fill in the gaps. So when somebody says to you, let's have a think of an example. It's hard work, isn't it? You say, what do you say? What's hard work? What's hard work? How specifically is it hard work? You don't say that. I'm never going to the pub with you. You don't say that. What do you really say when people say, if somebody that can't say, oh, it's hard work, isn't it? What do you say? Yes. Oh, yeah. Are you working hard or hardly working? Stuff like that. And you make polite conversation, yes? Assuming that the other person means the same thing as you think they mean, because they're leaving loads of information out and you're filling it back in from your own experience. And so when your friend in the pub says, I'll tell you what you want to do about your boss, and you know what you want to do, they're filling in gaps from their experience. When they say, I'll tell you what you should do, they're not telling you what they would do, they're telling you what they fantasize that they would like to do, if only they could stand up to their boss and tell him what they think of his miserable job and his useless company. So they assume that your problem is their problem. How can I have means have. We can't have an action. We can perform an action. We can do an action. But we can have an object. We can have a possession. And the concept of possession forces the verb into the place of the object. And when it forces the verb into the place where the object should be, what happens to the object? The real object. The subject is I. The nominalisation, or the way of thinking, the template, has forced the verb to somewhere it shouldn't be. And because it doesn't belong there, we change the word into something that sounds like an object but isn't really. And it sounds enough like an object, like my demonstration sounded enough like French. Because it sounds enough like an object, the listener can fill in the blanks and figure out what the speaker's talking about, but actually we can't. Because by pushing the verb to where the object should be, it's pushed the object out, and the object has gone where? It's just gone. It's gone missing. Now, if I'll draw you a little picture. Can anyone tell me what's missing?
Body of the ladybug.
Can anyone tell me what's missing? The structure tells us what isn't where it should be. The structure tells us what's missing altogether. So, if you've got does anybody here work in manufacturing industry? So do you adopt Six Sigma? And Six Sigma, one of the principles, one of the Kaizen principles is basically everything in its place. Everything where it should be. So you instantly know if something's missing because there's a gap where something should be. Like you see people in their garages and they've got little white outlines of where their tools go. So if there's a hammer missing, you know instantly that there's a hammer missing. You don't have to keep going into your toolbox every time, like I do, thinking, where's that bloody hammer? Getting everything, and then 3 times I've gone back to the toolbox and there it is right on top. And, I don't have to do that if everything's neatly organised. And our language and our behaviour may seem odd and random and perplexing at times, but it is incredibly organised with great precision. We don't do anything by mistake or by accident. Everything we do is planned and organised. Right now I'm wishing this workshop was more planned and organised, but you didn't know what to expect anyway, so that's fine. So the structure tells us what's missing, what isn't, where it should be. So the structure is meta-model. If we just take the simplest structure, subject, verb, object, and we look at it and we say, okay, where's the subject? I. Can I be a subject? How do we know that? How do we know that I can be a subject? Because it's a noun and the position, it's first in the sentence, comes before the verb. And for something to be a subject, it has to be able to act, to do. For something to be a subject, it has to be able to act. And although we attribute action to things, like, that cheese made me ill, or that cake made me fat, although we attribute action to objects, actually, the only kind of subject that can really act is what? Is a person. Is I a person? Then, yes, I can be a subject. And what you'll notice about this is there's nothing complicated about it. There's nothing fancy about this. Where is it? It's in the place of the subject. What is it? This person. Then that's okay. It's in the right place. Verb. Where's the verb? Have. It's kind of a verb, but it's a bit of a weird one. It's not really an action. I mean, what kind of word would be more of an action? To be or to? How about get? Well, I have a pen. Yeah, you all see a pen? How did I get this pen? Did anybody see me pick it up? You did. You remember me picking it up? You do remember it. You're keen eye. But if you didn't see me pick the pen up, then how do you know I've got it? Have is a snapshot in time now, which presupposes at some point, unless I was born with a pen in my hand, there was a time that I must have gotten it, I must have picked it up. So have's kind of a verb, but it's a bit of a weird one because the action happened sometime in the past. That doesn't really fit. Influence, that's where the object should be. Is influence an object? Is it a thing? No. It's a verb pretending to be a thing, but it isn't a thing. And so that's very interesting. If we just apply the simplest linguistic structure that we've got available, the simplest model in our model of models, in our meta model, straight away we can see there are things that don't belong. And very importantly, we can see that something has gone missing. So if we create the sentences would be grammatically correct. How can I? That bit's fine. No. Be more. Yes, influence, thank you. How can I influence? Because that's the verb and it belongs where the verb goes, after the subject. We don't need any more words in there. How can I influence? Straight away we need an object, and that tells us what our next question is. Michelle, who or what would you like to influence?
Project manager.
So, we've slowed the whole process down. But imagine that you're having a conversation with somebody. It might be a coaching session, it might be a conversation with a student on a training course, a colleague, anything. And they say to you, how can I have more influence? And in the blink of an eye, you've thought, influence, that's not a verb, but it's where the verb, that's not a thing, it's where the thing should be, it's a verb. If I put it back where the verb is, how can I influence? Now you know what your next question is. And look what happened when I asked her the question. She said, project managers. Why would I write down the and the ha-ha?
Strategy. It's part of the strategy.
It's part of the strategy, it's part of the program that's running. Laughter, very important. I mean, not just because it's fun. When people laugh like that, what does it mean? Realization?
Not as confident.
It's confident?
Not as confident.
Not as confident. Anybody else? What does it mean when somebody laughs when you ask them a question? Nervous. It is the release of tension. That means whatever Michelle did while she was saying made her feel stressed. And she released that stress with a little laugh. And then she didn't answer the question. Is anybody in this room a project manager? Anybody? No, there's normally one. There's normally one everywhere. Who's a project manager? Who are you pointing at? Pointing at? Who are you pointing? Oh, you're a project manager. Close enough. Michelle, what's your name, sir? Ian. Michelle, would you like to have a go at influencing Ian? Just so we can test this. What is this? For applying meta model. Project managers, what is that? It's a generalization. How can I influence project managers. All of them? I mean, that's what you would say after you've done your practitioner training, isn't it? All of them? You would do that. And then they would slap you. And that's how you would know the coaching session was over. So, or not, maybe you like that kind of thing. I don't know. I used to have this book of like funny true stories. And there was a Belgian, now let me think what kind of doctor he was. He was, I can't remember what specialism of doctor he was. But he was arrested for malpractice and for doing strange things with his patients. He used to get his female patients to get undressed and dance around his surgery while he accompanied them on the accordion. That was it. That was all he did. And the police found it very hard to prosecute him because none of his patients would make a complaint. Seemed they actually enjoyed it. Anyway, so I can't remember why I said, why did I say that? Can anybody remember? Ian, project managers, generalisations, and I don't know, anyway. So, generalisations, project managers, we know that's not true. How do we know? It's always the thing with meta model. Make it simple. Every step of the analysis that you're doing, you test by asking yourself, can that be really true? So imagine it. Imagine yourself wanting to influence project managers. Well, let's make it more general. Imagine yourself trying to influence managers. What comes to mind?
A lot of work.
It's a lot of work. There's a lot of managers out there. Anything else? What did you picture? Many managers, but you pictured people, managers. Did anybody picture a particular manager or group of managers? When I said imagine yourself influencing managers. Some of you, yeah? Good? That's what we're talking about. Something's going on when she's saying something is happening. She releases, it causes some stress or pressure. She releases that with a laugh. And then she avoids the question with a generalization. And from this, we could form an inference. We could think, oh, okay, I think I'm getting an idea of what's happening here. And then we test that. We don't just keep that to ourselves. We test it by asking the client, Michelle, when you said, how can I have more influence? Is there a particular person at work who doesn't do what you want them to do or need them to do? And is that a bit frustrating for you?
No, it's not about people.
It's not about people, it's about...
It's about the process. So it's actually about the process of the projects coming to us.
It's actually about the process of the projects coming to us.
And there's a poor handover.
Now there's another gap. It's actually about the projects coming to us. What's in the gap? What did she miss out?
Breathing.
So, another general principle in meta model. Every word has certain connections and dependencies. So, for example, every word has certain qualities or certain other words that will automatically go with it. So, cheese will have certain qualities that you would associate with cheese. So, what might they be? Smell?
Wine.
Wine? Fat? Cheese? Smell? Taste? Brown sauce? This isn't a therapy session. Yeah, this isn't food therapy, this is. Brown sauce, Branston pickle, whatever. There's certain things you associate with cheese. But if I talked about a cheese having arms, it wouldn't make any sense because those words don't connect. But some people do talk about cheese having legs. If it's been in the fridge for a very, very long time and it's tried to make it out the front door while you're getting the shopping in or something. People talk about cheese having legs as in having life, strength of flavour, something like that. They talk about wine having legs, it's robust, strong, that sort of thing. Metaphor, of course. So, there are certain words that connect with certain other words. So when she said, it's about the process, it's about work coming to us coming, to, coming from. So the word coming has coming to and coming from. And she only gave us one of those, and therefore we know there's a gap, we know there's incomplete, we know there's something she didn't tell us, and she didn't just tell us because she carried on talking afterwards. Now what she said was, it's about work coming to us, and then there was a bit of a pause, and then Michelle said,
It's about lack of handover.
it's about lack of handover. So she didn't just miss a bit out, it was like she had the audio of the whole thing, and she edited out the bit that she didn't want to talk about. Have you ever heard a client start to answer a question and then almost without missing a beat, they'll switch and be answering a different question or talking about something else? They'll say, you'll say, so how have you been since last time we spoke? And they'll say, oh yeah, it's great. Well, I went to that thing at the, and at home it's much, so I was at work the other day, for example, and what you might think is, oh, well, they've just got a lot to tell me. They can't get it all out at once. They've only got one mouth and, they can't say everything they want to say. What I'm going to suggest to you is that that's not what happens. When a person skips to a different conversation, it's like an old record player. And if you knocked it, it would skip to another track. I think that's what happens. Something gave that person a little nudge and they skipped to talking about something else. What is it that gave them that little nudge? The unconscious mind, yes. What kind of feeling do you think it was that gave them that little nudge? Tension, fundamentally fear. A little twinge just here. People think of fear, and when we're talking about fear in a coaching situation, people talk about fear like it's a really strong thing, like it's a really compelling emotion. It isn't. It's so strong, so powerful, you don't have to get anywhere near it. You just have to be, you don't have to get anywhere near, and it will just give you a little gentle little shove to make sure you don't get too close.
Could it also just be lack of clarity?
Lack of clarity caused by? Because when I've tested this with clients and I've gone back and I've said, you started saying about work, could you finish that sentence? And then they'll finish the sentence and there'll be something in there that they're avoiding. There's an avoidance of fear. Fear is so strong, we don't get anywhere near it. And it will just give you a little gentle little nudge and you won't even realise. So for example, have any of you recently sat down to do something work-wise and half an hour later you found yourself doing something else instead of the thing that you meant to do? And that's happened over and over and over again with the same thing. And that task that you didn't get round to doing was phoning somebody or challenging something like an unpaid invoice or something like that, or sending an invoice, that kind of thing. Anybody experienced that? Because every time you think, right, I'm going to do that, I put it on my to-do list, I put it on post-it note on my screen, I'm going to do it, and there's this other thing I just need to, let's do this other, I'll just get this done first. And then afterwards, you rationalise it, you say, that could wait another day. Oh, it's 5 o'clock, oh no, it's 5 o'clock now. They'll have gone home, there's no point in ringing them now. Well, I'll do it tomorrow morning. And then 2 weeks later, you still haven't done it. Because the fear is so strong, you don't experience it as fear. You experience it as distraction. And when that happens in the middle of a conversation, you'll hear the person, the speaker, change the subject. And oftentimes, they will swear blind that they haven't. No, I told you what it was. No, you said, and then you stopped, and then you said this. So, the bit that Michelle edited out was about where this work is coming from. Because we know, oh no, it's not the people that's the problem, it's the process that's the problem. We know that's a red herring. How do we know that's a red herring? How do we know that's not the real issue? Because somebody created the process, and people choose to follow the process. You've all got processes to follow, work, at home and stuff, and you don't follow them. Because you think, well, in this situation, whatever it might be, I need to do this instead, or, well, the circumstances, or the customer it was really urgent, or whatever. So we know the process isn't the problem. We know it's the people choosing to follow the process that's the problem. We know they're the people that the work is coming from. We know they're the verb, the object on the end of influence. We know that they're hidden within project managers who maybe dig their heels in and say, oh, it's more than my job's worth not to follow the process, or whatever it might be. Michelle, who is it? You don't have to name them. You don't need to give them a name. But who's the person that is causing you some stress at work in relation to projects and work and influence and so on?
It isn't a specific person. It is a collective. It's a very male-dominated environment.
Now,
And I said that to Eric.
did anybody hear that? She said, it isn't a particular person, it's a collective. And then she leant forward and she said, it's a collective. And then she went, it's a very male-dominated. Who is it? This male-dominant. I don't need a name. You don't need, because, you know, it might be one of you. I don't know. But we don't need to go into the detail of what it is. But you understand the point I'm making. There is a specific example, and the clue is it's the person who Michelle has not yet found a way to influence in a way that is to Michelle's liking. Who is the person who you've not been able to influence in a way that you would like to?
Okay. It'd be my very senior boss. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. But it is the whole...
Well,
it is the whole...
but your whole senior boss is the ringleader, creates the culture, other people follow the example.
Yes.
And there've been many things. It's not just projects. He doesn't pay attention.
And he doesn't listen.
What's she doing now? He doesn't pay attention and he doesn't listen. And what's she doing now?
She's excusing why she's not.
Yes, but she's gone into this kind of free flow. What does that tell us? We've hit on the right thing. We've actually identified the core of the issue. She's now unloading all of her frustration and all of the, you know, the stuff that causes her this to be something that's important for her personally, because she can't stop talking now. What happens is, the way I think about it is like a machine. Whenever I'm doing meta model analysis, which is pretty much all the time, I think of it like a machine. So this machine does a certain job, and Michelle does whatever it is she does. And then she hits a barrier, which is fear. And when she hits that barrier, what does she do? We hear the and the laughter. But in reality, in real life, when she's experiencing this in real life, what does she do when she gets here?
Changes direction.
Goes back. And so the experience will be, I feel like I'm going around in circles with this. Would that be? It feels like I'm banging my head against a brick wall. I feel like I'm stuck. And the smaller this cycle gets, and over time, the cycle will get smaller and smaller. It'll go from feeling like I've been here before to I'm banging my head against a brick wall to I'm stuck. What happens when we push them over or through this imaginary barrier of fear? What happens? Start moving again. And that's what we just heard. That spontaneous unloading is what we hear when we're no longer constrained by this. Does this mean that Michelle now has more influence? No. Well, it might do, but probably not. What does it mean? If we're having a client-coach conversation with Michelle, if Michelle is your client, what does this mean? Where are we? What have we achieved?
More awareness.
Understanding, awareness.
Feeling more safe about exploring options and solutions of the fears.
She might feel more safe to explore because we've kind of put the fear behind us. And that's dangerous, Because she'll go away from the coaching session feeling great that she's unloaded. Next week, she'll be right back here again. And the hardest thing to do for you, I would suggest, as a coach, is to grab your client and drag them back right into the middle of this sphere. And the reason that's hard is because they won't like it and they'll resist. And they will resist by distracting and changing the subject or actively resisting and whatever they do. More importantly, you remember I said at the beginning about how when you're making that connection with the underlying template, the underlying reason why people behave the way that they do, you will get a very strong sense of rapport, connection with that person. When you're in rapport with your client, you will feel what? You will feel your client's fear. When you're in rapport, rapport isn't something you do to your client, it's a two-way process. You are influencing and being influenced. So when you're in rapport with your client, you will feel what they feel. So you will avoid, as a coach, have you ever avoided asking a question because you thought it might be too tough or too challenging? The reason that you're doing that, the reason that you're avoiding or distracting yourself is you're feeling their fear. It feels horrible. The closer you get to this, the more they will exhibit their distracting behaviours, the more that will distract you, and you'll end up the session feeling like, you know what, that wasn't the most productive coaching session I've ever done. And you'll think, oh, I should have asked them this, or I should have asked them that, whatever it might be. We've got to drag them back into here. I'm not going to do that with Michelle because that's not what she came here for. Is it what you came here for?
No.
No.
We need to learn more.
So that's not what Michelle came here for, so I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll put that in as a proposal for next year's present conference, who knows. A conference title, what will the session title be? How to drag your clients forcibly into the the zone of fear, or something like that. No, so I'm not going to do that because Michelle didn't ask me to. She didn't come here with that in mind. It's not what she wanted. It's not what's printed on her ticket. And so I'm not going to go into that. But
all I was going to say is, when you said it was fear, it literally it shifted from shoulders to stomach.
Mm-hmm.
It was but in a good way.
But in a good way.
Yeah, because so from stomach it feels like something I can deal with. When it's in my shoulders, it's just tension.
So when it's in my stomach, it's something I can deal with. When it's in my shoulders, it's just tension. It's something I can deal with. So Michelle's telling us that she's a bit of a control freak. But then aren't we all? Because control for us means what? Or equates with or leads to safety. So we want to be in control because that's how we feel safe. And when we're safe, we feel relaxed and we're okay and everything's all right. And our perspective changes. And Michelle said the feeling shifted from her shoulders down to her stomach, and then that's something that she can deal with. She doesn't want me to help her to have more influence. She already knows how to have more influence. That wasn't the issue. That was the issue. Now, I said to you that the client will tell you everything you need to know in the first minute or in the first sentence, or actually before they start. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 words. Just imagine, if you start a coaching session, the client gives you 6 words, and you don't need to ask them any other questions other than checking your deductions and inferences. You don't need to gather any more information than that. How would that affect the relationship with the client, do you think? You don't know. What time are we due to finish? 15 minutes, aren't we? So, I've given you, where's the handout? Here it is. Oh, Michelle, for playing along. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
So you all wish you to put your hands up now? Unless you've already bought the book, in which case, no refunds. So, I've put here some ideas about meta-model, about things that you might have thought were true based on a kind of a scripted, rote way of learning meta-model. Like, for example, modal operators. Fascinating. They're rules that tell us the conditions under which an action will be performed. And modal operators of necessity are external, and possibility are internal. So if someone says, I must, I have to, what they're telling you is that's not them that's deciding that at some point they're going to perform an action. Somebody else has told them. And if they're saying can, would, want, that's coming from inside, internal. Here's an interesting one, distorted referential index. So, anybody like watching Louis Theroux on the telly? He's like an investigative reporter on Channel 4 a lot. Great TV shows. He has this really terrific way of looking blankly at somebody and them just saying more and more and more and then just making himself sound really stupid without him having to do anything. He has a terrific naivety about him. And some years ago, he did a documentary on porn stars in California. And then sometime later, he went back and interviewed the ones who were still alive. And he was talking to a woman, and she'd been married to this guy. They were both porn stars. And she said to Louis Theroux that, what is it? It's about Chet. Her husband was Chet. She said to him something like, if you want to have a happy life, you have to get off the drugs. That's what Chet and I did, something like that. And it sounds like she's giving good advice. You've got to get off drugs. I mean, that sounds reasonable, isn't it? Is it? What has to be true for you to get off drugs? Beyond them. If you want a happy life, you have to get off drugs. Does anybody here want a happy life out of interest? Hands up if you want a happy life. That's some of you. That's literally some of you. So if you want a happy life, most people would go, that's me. Then, here it comes. Here's the advice. This is what I have to do. You have to get off the drugs. Okay? Can't just be off drugs. Can't have never taken drugs in your life. You have to get off them. So actually, on the superficial level, it sounds like good advice. Second level down, it sounds like a hypnotic command for you to take drugs. But actually, at the third level, the next level down, it's actually what I call a normalizing statement. It's a statement that if the client makes the statement and the coach or the listener or the friend or whoever says, oh yes, it verifies what I just said. And if somebody verifies what I just said, that makes me right and normal. And one thing I've learned is that people would much rather be right than be happy. So if I say, if you want a happy life, you've got to get off the drugs. She said, Chet and I did that many times. And that relationship, that situation, that way of life was held in place by an actual counterbalance of two opposing forces, two opposing fears. So, there's some ideas on here. Turn to the person next to you. And if they were to give you a coaching session, which they're not, but if they were, tell them, what is the thing that you would say to your coach? What's the question that you would have? What is it that you would want more or less of in your life? I should tell you as well, there's some sheets, are they on the table here or outside? I'm running a Master Prac and a trainer training later this year. Master Prac's next month. If you put your name on those sheets, you might win a free place. So that would be worth having. So do that. But on Master Prac, we do basically these exercises and lots of this sort of stuff. I can't remember why I said that. Why did I start talking about Master Prac? Oh yeah, that was it. So one of the most important skills that you develop when you're doing this kind of this approach is something like a mental tape recorder. Now I was lucky here. How can I have more influence? I only got 6 words, plus a few more, and the ums and the ahs and all that sort of stuff. But if a client can give you a 20-word opening statement, and you can write that down verbatim, including the pauses and the ums and the ahs, because as soon as you stop listening to them and start thinking, oh, what question am I going to ask? Oh, what does that mean? You stop listening. And now they've got to do more of the same thing before you catch what the underlying template is. What is the underlying template for Michelle? What is the program or the template or the experience or the belief or the expectation or the rule within Michelle that Michelle has learned through the course of her life that means that what she's described with the people at work and the processes and the senior boss, that makes that frustrating, that makes that a problem for her? What is it fundamentally? What fundamentally is this really all about for Michelle? Permission. Interesting. Shut up. She lost. Okay, any other ideas? Yeah? Her father. Well, you know, the thing is that the people we experience earliest in our lives create the most templates for how we interpret the actions of people in the future. So there is certainly something to be said for our interactions or experiences of our parents and teachers when we were young, will tell us how to expect other people to behave, and most importantly will tell us what we need to do to get them to do what we want. And so there's something about how could I influence this person, I need to influence this person in order for them to do something or do something different or give me something. I need to influence this person. So there's something about that, which, you know, we'd explore. The point is, we got all of this material, all of this direction, all of the questions, all the information we needed really was in those 6 words. We didn't have to do anything else. There was nothing more we needed than that. We didn't have to ask a lot of questions. We didn't have to ask, oh, tell me about a typical situation at work and what's happening, and oh, is it all terrible? And they said what? Oh, I wouldn't stand for that. We don't have to do all of that. 6 words was all we needed. I've done this with 1 word. That 1 word was happiness. There's as much in 1 word, like happiness, as there is in 20 words. Because the word is just an example. What's important is that we determine what? The structure that those words fit into. Because the structure, using meta model, will tell us what is where it shouldn't be, what's missing. And that's what we ask about, that's what we find out about. If this all sounds simple, it's because it is. There are so many people that overcomplicate meta model. It's simple. It's about understanding what are the different permutations for language, so that if I know what the permutations are, I know when something isn't where it should be. I know when something's gone missing. So, yes, you can ask a question, Michelle.
So is it common? So for now, it's... Okay, so it's not about my dad, because I don't know my dad, but I'll give you too much. But now, it's not about influence.
It's not about my dad, because I don't know my dad.
It's about change. I want to change it for the better.
It's about change. Change, what kind of word is change in this context? Nominalisation. And remember, making an action into an object in this context means that Michelle can do what? If she turns an action with a person into an object, at least in language and the way she thinks about it, she can do what with it? She can control it. But don't worry, everyone's a control freak, because it's how we feel safe. So very quickly, we've been told that because we're a big group, they want to stagger the lunch break, so we need to take lunch at 1:15. So if you want to leave at 1, you can do, but they've asked us to go at 1:15. If you're watching on Facebook, you don't have to take lunch at 1:15. You can do. I'll show you a picture of a sandwich if you want, but you don't need to. You can go anytime you want. And if you're watching this on Facebook afterwards, after today, please don't vote. The lines are closed. Your vote won't be counted, but you may still be charged for the call. So, if you want to hang around, hang on, there's another question.
Why did you give the explanation for all this as happiness, not attention?
Happiness, not attention. Well, no, what I'm saying is, in one exercise like this, what the person gave was one word, and that word was happiness. But we could still meta-model that one word.
It's not attention, it's not related to this case.
Not this case, no, that's somebody else. So if you want to have a practice, then turn to the person next to you and tell them something that you would tell a coach. Anybody fancy doing that? Or have you had enough? Yeah, you can do that. You can turn to the person next to you, say, if I was going to work with you as a coach, I would want, this would be my question. And between the two of you, just see what jumps out. What jumps out here is, that word doesn't belong there. So give that a go if you like. Just take 5 minutes and give it a go. Okay, so questions about the question. Did anybody do it with something different, with a different statement?
Sorry?
Anybody try it with a different statement that you got from your partners? Yeah? What have you got over there?
We started with, why don't I want to work hard?
Why don't I want to work hard? Because I'm normal. And what jumped out at you about that?
Well, it seemed to me, work hard what?
Work hard what? Okay.
And then we started.
Aha. So the object got moved to the start of the sentence. Yeah, that happens too. Interesting, very good. So what was the original statement again? Why don't I want to work hard? So if we take that, as a quick analysis, why? When we ask the question why, what do? We reinforce the statement that was just preceded it. So why presupposes that what the person said was true. So I'm going to the shops. Why presupposes I'm definitely going to the shops. Why don't I isn't the same as why do I not. Why do not I? Rather than why not do I? Why do I not? These are different. It's important because what I do when I'm thinking about meta model with a client is whatever they said, I try and play it out in my own mind. I think, okay, if I was doing that and just following their words as instructions, what would happen? Why do not? So there's a start and then a stop. Why don't I want to work hard? Want. When do we want things versus need things? We want things that we don't have. And we need things that we don't want to lose. So why don't I want to work hard presupposes is not working hard. But the do not order tells us there's a little start-stop loop. So I'm going to make a guess, and you can tell me that I'm right or wrong. What's your name, sorry? Toby. I'm going to make a guess. This was Toby's statement, was it? So I'm going to make a guess, Toby, just based on what you've said, that you feel like you start things but you don't put the effort in and see them through and get the results from that, and you maybe start lots of things, maybe one after the other, or maybe all at the same time, and don't feel like you get anywhere with it. Yes. So that's quick, yes? And if you say that to a client and the client says, yeah, that's exactly it. It's weird. How did that feel when I said that to you? Weird. It's a weird feeling. It's like, oh my God, this person can see the real me and they look like they're okay with that. Maybe I'm not as crazy as I thought. So, it's been a very quick, whirlwind, real example, I hope, of what we do in meta model, how we can slow the process down, how quick it can be, how easy it is. It's not complicated. It's not about learning lots of different language structures. If you're interested in being able to do this kind of thing, take this approach with a coaching client, I've got some books, and they're in my stand and also in the bookshop. The one I would recommend that's most like this session would be Coaching Excellence. I know a lot of people have bought Master Practitioner Manual, so they've nearly sold out of that. And the Master Prac Manual has the meta model in it, but so does Coaching Excellence. And in Coaching Excellence, it's more applied into a coaching context, and it's cheaper as well. Remember to put your name down on the list, and you might win a free place on Master Prac or Trainer Training. Do any of you happen to live in the southwest of England? There's a Southwest Coaching and Mentoring Conference in June, organised by the Southwest Councils. If you look on my website, you'll see a link to it from the events page. But if you're interested in this sort of thing, that might be an event worth going to as well. I'm doing 2 sessions there, can you believe? One's about the unsticker, which is like a creative problem-solving tool. One's about how you get corporate coaching, big corporate coaching programs to work, and how to get people to stay engaged with them, and so on. So, I'm here all weekend, here till Sunday. I've got to stand over in the corner. If you've got any questions, anything you want to ask, any complaints, then come and see me anytime. Anything I can do to help. I think you've probably all got a card or a bit of paper that's got my details on. If you want to get in touch anytime, love to hear from you. Love to hear from you all too as well, people in Facebook land. Thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for staying with it. Enjoy your lunch. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.